In the field of medicine today, the use of scanning equipment is invaluable. Invaluable. When you go to the doctor or you go to the emergency room, you tell them, I've got this problem. They're probably going to tell you pretty quick, let us look inside and see if we can tell what's going on. In days gone by, they'd send you first down for the x-rays. But today, the use of scanning equipment, that is generally the first tool in the toolbox. The MRI, it will unveil the back and the neck and anything pertaining to our frame. The CAT scan, with the contrast, that lovely dye that they give you to drink in that refreshing little drink. If you've ever been through this, you know the one. But that dye, that contrast will, in anything in the body, I'm not as versed on this as I am Scripture, so I'm struggling here. Got some doctors sitting here to do a better job with this, but it will show anything that is inflamed, the portions of the body. You can see that clearly. If a doctor's concerned about your heart, he's going to run an EKG. But I'm not so concerned this morning about all that. That's down at the hospital. The thing I want to talk to you about a little bit this morning is the spiritual heart. The spiritual heart. And there's ways to scan that too. Jesus, Matthew chapter 12, verse 34, he said, for out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. It means for every action, for every word that we have, it begins in the heart. It has its inception there, its incubation there. Before we ever say it, or before we ever do it, before it ever sees the light of day, it begins in the heart, Jesus said. I wonder this morning, on this special day, if we could look into a mother's heart, if we could scan it, what would we see? Oh, I think we'd see a variety of things, but I think the first thing we would probably see would be ambition for her children. Mrs. Zebedee certainly had it. Do you remember Mrs. Zebedee? The wife of Zebedee, Matthew chapter 20, she comes to Jesus with a very bold request. She displayed tremendous self-interest for her sons, excusable self-interest as a mother, but it was a very gutsy move on her part. She approached Jesus and kneeling down, she asked him this. She said, grant that one of these sons of mine could sit at your right hand and the other one could sit at your left hand when you come into your kingdom. Now, these two sons, these two boys, who were they? Who were they? Well, they were James and John. James and John. But James and John, if you follow them closely and you look at them as you go through the ministry of Jesus, they didn't always make the right decisions. It was James and John in Luke chapter 9 that got very frustrated. In fact, got angry because the Samaritans there were not welcoming them. And they wanted to call fire down from heaven to destroy these Samaritans, and Jesus turned and rebuked them. He said, no. So they went to another city. But it was these two brothers, James and John, who were allowed to go up on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. Only 3 of the 12 got to go up. They were 2 of the 3. 2/3 of the disciples, apostles, that got to go to the top of the mountain. They stood there. They heard. They listened. They watched. They heard the words of God when he said, this is my son, whom I'm well pleased. This is him, the one whom I love. Listen to him. Hear ye him. They were there. They were on the mountain. The night that Jesus was about to go to the cross, about to go to that cruel death, and he was praying in the garden. James and John, again, two of the only three that got to do this, they went a little further into the garden that night with Jesus than 9 of the apostles. James and John. John is the one. John is the one at that Last Supper, according to John chapter 13. He was there closest to Jesus, leaning against Jesus. Oh, James and John's mother, Mrs. Zebedee, had a lot of ambition for her boys. Mothers do that. My mother did. I was blessed, still blessed, to have a mother that she would do anything in the world, whatever it took, whatever sacrifice was necessary, to do anything for me and my brother. She still would. She still would. I was grown before I realized that she really did like pie and cake and all the other good things that my dad and my brother and I liked. But you know, when it came time and there wasn't as much of it left, the leftovers were there of those sweets or you wanted or whatever, she cut it in 3 pieces, not 4 pieces. She'd say, I really don't want any. Yeah, she did. She did, but it was more important to her that her 3 boys have it, her husband and her 2 sons have it, than for her to enjoy it. That's who she was. That's what she was. She cooked 3 meals a day for us as we worked on the farm, and then she worked just as hard as anybody else in between the cooking of the meals. She was the school mother for our classes at school. Room mother, I think they called them. The room mother for our grade school classes. She taught Sunday school classes every Sunday at church. She was our transportation everywhere that we went. She had ambition for her boys. Did she pray that her 2 sons become gospel preachers? I don't know. But I know she was very pleased when we did. But she had ambition. That's the first thing we're going to see when we scan the heart of a mother. Second thing I think we'll see is a protective spirit for children. Jochebed certainly was. You say, well, I don't have any idea. Who in the world was Jochebed? Oh, you know who she was. You just don't recognize her name. She was the mother of Moses. And when Moses was born, he was born to a time of heartache. Joseph had died. Pharaoh had made slaves out of God's people, and all of the Israelite male children that were born in Egypt were killed. But Jochebed had a protective spirit for her son. And she defied the authorities. There's no question. Had she been caught, she would have been executed that quickly, without a second thought. But she took her baby Moses, and hid him and put him in the ark of the bulrushes and put him out on the Nile River. Miriam, his sister, her daughter, was there watching. And she saw the daughter of Pharaoh come down to the river and find baby Moses, and she watched as the daughter of Pharaoh took Moses into the king's palace to be raised there. But Moses' mother was able to pose as a nursemaid, and she was able to be there and to raise him and to teach him and protect him. There's nothing that she would have not done for her child. You know, today, when we turn on the news, I don't care which channel you turn on, which network you listen to, I'm going to guarantee you something. Today, if you go home and turn it on, you will hear pretty quickly something said and mentioned about sanctuary cities, and even over on the western shore, West Coast, maybe even a sanctuary state. I'm not here to talk politically this morning in favor or opposed to or anything. I'm here to say one thing. One thing. Our homes ought to be sanctuary homes for our children. They need to be. They need to be places of refuge for our kids because they have to face a lot of things. Our kids, our grandkids, they're exposed to threats and dangers, threats for their safety, threats for decency and morality and godliness. It's being threatened everywhere around, and even threats pertaining to their self-confidence and their self-esteem. A home ought to be a sanctuary city for our families. It ought to be a place where the children are safe, where they are safe from all the things that threaten them. It ought to be a place, it ought to be a place where Jesus is Lord and God is obeyed and righteousness and godliness and good things are talked about and taught. It ought to be a place where you're not picked on, you're not made fun of, you're not ridiculed, you're not put down, but you are somebody special. Mothers have this tendency. They have this gene in them. This is part of their DNA. And it's not so strange because God has it too. The prophet Hosea says that God, speaking of God, said he guarded, he chastened, he protected Israel like a bear robbed of her cubs. That's Hosea 13, verse 8. Like a bear robbed of her cubs, God said, I will attack them and rip them apart. That's in a mother's DNA. That's part of the heart of a mother when you scan it. Thirdly, though, I think if we were to run that scan of a mother's heart this morning, we'd see a sacrificial love and an unending service for her children. Sacrificial love and an unending service. Grade school teacher one day during science class was teaching the class about magnets. Magnets. And she gave them a little pop quiz the next morning. And on the top of the pop quiz, it said, here's a hint. Here's a hint. It says, my name starts with an M. It has 6 letters. And I pick up things. Over half of her class put mother as the answer. Starts with an M. 6 letters. And picks up things. That's got to be mother. Mother. And she does it without ever quitting. A mother's work is never done. There's a sacrificial love that only mothers seem to have. The Apostle Paul defended his actions to the Thessalonians when he wrote to the church there at Thessalonica. 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 7, he said, we were gentle among you. How, Paul? Gentle among you, like a mother caring for her children. Oh, there's no doubt mothers sometimes wonder if they're ever going to make it. Am I ever going to make the goal line? Am I going to get to the end zone? One sweet husband one day decided he was going to do something special for his wife. So on the way home, he stopped and he got some candy, and he got some flowers. And when he got home, instead of going to the back door like he usually does and just go in the house, he went around front and went up on the front porch and rang the doorbell. She came to the door. He was standing there with flowers in one hand and candy in the other. When she opened the door, he said, "Honey, I sure love you." When he said that, she just started crying, just sobbing. She said, "This day has been awful. This is a terrible day." She said, the kids are sick. The refrigerator quit running. I had to throw out all of the food. I cut my finger trying to cook supper. I fell down today and sprung my ankle. And she said, "And now you come home drunk. How can this day get any worse?" They asked one mother one day, they said, "If you had it to do over again, would you have kids?" She said, "Yes, just different ones, not these. I'd like to try a different group. I'd like to have another bunch." But mothers never quit, regardless of what takes place, regardless of how bad it is. It's in your DNA. You don't quit. Maybe this morning you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, my kids are grown now, or maybe even I never had any children. I never had the opportunity. Do you realize you can still show these qualities as a mother, sometimes as a surrogate mother? A surrogate mother. There's a little verse tucked away at the end of Romans. It's always intrigued me. At the close of that beautiful letter that Paul writes to the church at Rome in chapter 16, Paul has a list there, and he singles out some members of that good church that had been special to him. And in verse 13, this is what he says. He said, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and greet his mother, who has been a mother to me too." Rufus's mother got in with honorable mention, simply because she not only had been a good mother to Rufus, but she had been like a mother to Paul as well. How many of us have had those special ladies, those special women in the church that have been like a mother to us? And I can just see Paul saying, when I needed encouragement, she encouraged me. Maybe when I got to thinking a little bit too highly of myself as the apostle coming in here, maybe Rufus's mother pulled him aside and said, "Now, Paul, you don't need to act that way." I don't know what she did, but I know inspired scripture includes her, because Paul says she was like a mother to me too. That's a surrogate mother. Let me tell you about Teddy Stoddard and Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson was a 5th grade teacher. It was the first day of school, and there in the front row of her classroom was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Teddy was slumped down in his seat. He showed all of the signs of being a source of trouble for the new year ahead, and she was a little bit concerned. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy years earlier as he grew up in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd grade, playing out on the playground, and she had noticed the year before that he didn't play well with other children. He's always messy, his hair needed combing, his clothes needed washing, and he didn't pay attention very well. And she just thought, this boy, he's going to be a problem. But here's what she found out. She decided she wanted to know a little bit more about Teddy. So she pulled his records, his file, at the school. This is what she discovered. Teddy's first grade teacher had written this, said, Teddy is a bright child with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly. He has good manners. He is a joy to be around. That's first grade. His second grade teacher wrote this, Teddy is an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness. And life at home has got to be a struggle. Third grade teacher wrote this, Teddy's mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life is going to soon affect him if some steps are not taken. Fourth grade teacher wrote this, Teddy is withdrawn, doesn't show much interest at school, doesn't have many friends. Sometimes he sleeps in class. Well, when Christmas time came around, all of the other kids brought Mrs. Thompson presents that were wrapped in beautiful paper and pretty ribbons, except Teddy. Teddy brought her a present that was wrapped in brown paper that was obviously, it had come from the supermarket. It was a grocery sack. She opened it up. When she opened it up, the kids started laughing, snickering in class because she pulled out a rhinestone bracelet. Several of the stones were missing. But she silenced the kids' laughter because she put it on. And she said, oh, Teddy, that is such a beautiful, beautiful bracelet. She reached in the box again and pulled out a little bottle of perfume that had about 2/3 of it gone. Just a little bit in the bottle. She took it and she dabbed it on her ears. She said, oh, that just smells so beautiful. Well, when class was over, Teddy hung around. He came back in. He said, Mrs. Thompson, I just want you to know, you smelled so good that you smelled just like my mommy did on our last Christmas together. Well, Ms. Thompson, she cried for probably an hour after everybody else was gone. And she decided that day, I'm going to change my attitude towards Teddy. And I'm going to give Teddy special, special attention. And she did. She did. A year later, she started getting some notes from Teddy. Here's what they said. She said, I just wanted to tell you, Mrs. Thompson, you're still the best teacher I ever had in my whole life. 6 years later, she got this note from Teddy. He said, I've finished high school, 3rd in my class. I've graduated. But I want you to know, Ms. Thompson, you're still the best teacher I ever had. 4 years after that, she got another letter from Teddy saying that times had been tough, but he had managed to graduate from college. He had a bachelor's degree, but he wanted her to know that through all of it, she was still his favorite teacher. 4 more years passed. She got another letter. This time he said, you know, I decided I was going to go a little bit further, and I went to graduate school. And said, you're still my best teacher. But when he signed this letter, it was a longer name. This time it was Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. M.D. Well, the story doesn't end there. She got one more letter. One more letter. A couple of years later, Teddy said, Ms. Thompson, I've met a special girl. I'm going to be married. He explained to her his father had died a couple of years ago. And he said, I was just wondering, Ms. Thompson, if you possibly could you come to the wedding and sit at the place that's usually reserved for the mother of the groom? Well, she showed up. And she was there. And she was wearing the rhinestone bracelet that had stones out of it. And she was wearing the cheap perfume that reminded him of his mother. And when the wedding was over, Teddy went up to her, and these were his words. He whispered these words in her ear. He said, "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you so much for making me feel important and showing me that I could make a difference." She whispered back. She said, "Teddy, you've got it all wrong." She said, "You are the one who taught me that I can make a difference." You can make a difference, even as a surrogate. You say, okay, we're talking about mothers. Why are we talking about mothers so much other than it's Mother's Day? Shouldn't we be talking about something biblical? Something scriptural or something like that? Let me make one more little point to you. Something that the prophet Isaiah tells us. Isaiah reminds us that God's business is mother's business. Let me read you real quickly this scripture. It's from the 66th chapter of Isaiah. Then he said, God talking to Israel, "I will carry you on my side." Do you ever see mothers do that? I don't know how they do it. I don't know if they're built different or what. They carry those kids on their hip all day long. Breaks my back the times I've tried to do it. God said, "I'll carry you on my side. I'll carry you on my hip. I will bounce you on my knees." You ever do that? You ever bounce your kids, your grandkids, ride the horsey or whatever? And then he said, "And as a mother comforts, so I will comfort you." Mother's business is God's business. God's business is mother's business. And we need to be about his business. But to do that, you got to obey him in faith, repentance, and baptism. You got to be one of his. So you, me, we can all make a difference. If you need to respond in any way, I can't think of a finer time than today on this special day. Won't you come as we stand and sing? Blessed